So, a very big welcome to Pennine Ham tonight, to those who are watching us live on YouTube and the hundreds of people that watch us on YouTube after the event. Some of them club members, many of them not. You're all very welcome to come to any of our meetings, both live and watch the videos. We don't exclude anyone for any basis at all, and delighted to have you here tonight. I was taken several months ago actually, by an article in RadCom that was written by Dave, our speaker tonight, the first of a series about safety is not an accident. And I thought that was a lovely title, but I read the article and realised it was going to be part of a series. So in fact, as I put in the club email that went out, a series of these dutifully appeared in RadCom, and I put in little screenshots in the email I sent to all those on our mailing list last week of the three screenshots of the three articles. The first one was in December 24, the second one in March 25, and the last one in June 25. So a three-part presentation.
There's another one going to be published shortly. So the final one.
Excellent. Okay, so we're getting in before the final one's published. And when I read the article, and I just want to put this to Dave before he starts his presentation, I realised as radio amateurs, very few of us come from the professional background of working in radio and electronics. For most of us, it's a hobby. It might be a hobby we've had from childhood. It might be a hobby we've come into through CB radio, perhaps. A number of people came into our hobby on that route in the 80s and 90s. But however it was that people came into radio, the number of people who practice radio electronics engineering for a full-time occupation, I think in our hobby is always been pretty well a minority. And so we're all amateurs, and we all love fiddling. And the unfortunate thing with fiddling is that we can do some daft things sometimes. And I can say that Dave was saying as he came in that, and Bob just said that actually to us just now about signing off from meetings earlier as he gets older and going to bed earlier than he used to do. My wife reminds me every time I say I need to get a ladder out to go and adjust an antenna in the garden, whether it's just a pulley holding a wire, whatever it might be. She insists that I don't do it when I'm in the house by myself, and she insists on being on the bottom of the ladder. And as I'm going up the ladder, she's telling me every step to be careful, and then come down when she's still there. And to start with, I thought to myself, this is a bit of overkill, but actually I realised it is actually very sensible advice, isn't it? Because if one of us falls off a ladder, 20 foot down onto even a garden or concrete, we're likely to do very severe damage to ourselves at best. If we're very lucky, we can walk away from it. So those days, and I can think back to them in my more youthful days, when I lived in Charlton, Dave, not far from where you live, climbing onto the top of my 3-storey Victorian terraced house with a ladder, climbing up the climbing up the roof, no roof ladder, of course, and no support, all by myself, to get to the top, to fix a pulley and gubbins and an antenna to the chimney at the top of the house. And then realising when I was there it was very high, and I better be very careful when I came back down to make sure that the ladder didn't fall away from me as I went into it. Those days of doing daft things, which you can do at any age, of course, hopefully are behind me. But it did make me think, just for me personally, that we have to be aware of these things, both for ourselves and for other people. And so I thought Dave's articles, although lots of people, and there may be some in our club, who look at this and go, oh no, not the health and safety brigade telling us what we can and can't do. Actually, I think there are very, very good reasons for all of us to be very aware, both for ourselves, for our family, for neighbours, and for members of the public that might come in touch with anything that we're up to. So on that note, Dave, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, Dave, and take it away.
Right, let's get the just get the sharing up. Hang on. Share screen. Right. At this point, you should all be able to see my screen, yeah?
We can indeed, Dave, yeah.
Good. Okay, I'll just go into PowerPoint and just, oh, actually, it's already there. Right, okay. First thing, I'm not actually going to tell you to do anything tonight, I'm afraid, except for one thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stress the need for planning. I'm certainly not going to go down the route of, oh, you must wear hard hats, you must wear boots or whatever. You mustn't go up ladders, you mustn't do this. That's not the objective of this talk or my articles in RadCom. The objective was to stress the need for planning with safety. I'll explain why in a moment. Oh, screen's got stuck. Hang on. Oh, there we go. A bit about me first. I've been licensed since 1973, started off as a G8, lived it for 2 years in the States and got a US extra license, and then got my M0 when I came back here. And, I've been not active all those years. Things like family and kids and things got in the way. But certainly for the last 20 years, I've been quite active. In my work life, you're right, I'm a professional telecoms engineer. Worked 30 years in the telecoms industry, including working offshore deep sea, and 10 years in the oil and gas industry. And those are both very unforgiving environments. If you have an accident at sea, things like helicopters and lifeboats and goodness knows what gets involved. So, they're very, very, sort of unforgiving environments. But what that means is I've worked with some of the very best health and safety people in the world, and they're really very professional. And they're certainly not the, oh, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that brigade. Like I said, I've written 3 safety articles so far for RadCom. There's another one going to press shortly. And finally, I'm now a full-time granddad. In fact, my granddaughter's here tonight. So if you hear any domestic noises in the background, that's what it is. First thing to say, amateur radio is a very safe hobby. But there are some risks. And the thing that bothers me slightly about the hobby is that we don't actually record accidents in the way that, for example, the oil and gas industry does, or the airline industry particularly. So actually, we don't really know. And I think a lot of accidents happen in the hobby which are just not recorded, or the knowledge isn't passed on so other people can learn. So that's just part of that for a minute. Right, I'm going to come up with some definitions first of all, so we all understand what we're talking about. And the first of these is, so let's get rid of that thing off the screen. First thing of these is, what is an accident? This is absolutely, crucial to the whole thing. An accident is an unplanned incident that either injures somebody, damages property, or curtails the event or reduces its effectiveness. So say, for example, we're running a special event station to demonstrate to the public, and one of the antennas falls over, then obviously, we're not going to be able to either do the event at all, or if we can, we're not going to be able to do it to its full extent. But clearly the most serious of these is, personal injury, particularly if it affects a member of the public. And accidents are not fun. I did one of these presentations and somebody argued very strongly, oh, you're trying to take the fun out of amateur radio. No, I'm not at all, but an accident certainly aren't fun. Another definition which is crucial to understanding health and safety is the near miss. And this is an incident that very nearly caused an accident, and in very slightly different circumstances would have done. You can often tell one of these by expressions like, wasn't it lucky that, or no harm done. And this time, of course, because next time the circumstances might be very slightly different and it could actually cause an accident. So if you have a near miss, something that nearly causes an accident, don't just write it off as being lucky. Analyze what happens and prevent future accidents. So near misses should never be ignored. And actually, they're far more common than actual accidents. I think I read somewhere something like there are 10 near misses for every 1 accident, but even so, they still shouldn't be ignored. And there's somebody, carrying a box, not looking where he's going, about to trip over that box on the floor. And that would count as a near miss, assuming he didn't trip up, of course. Just a few more definitions. A hazard. It's something that could cause an accident. And hazards have two important things about them. One is the probability of them causing an accident. And secondly, the severity of the accident it might cause. And hazards depend on their context. So, for example, smoking has got the potential to start fires. If you're smoking in the middle of a field, frankly, the probability of an accident is very, very low. On the other hand, if you're on an offshore gas rig, where I've been, smoking would most definitely be a very, very serious hazard. And it's, they're banned on those platforms, of course. And a hazard becomes a danger when it's not managed properly. So if you manage a hazard properly, the danger goes away or almost goes away. And this is an example. This is an offshore gas rig that I've worked on. Loads of hazards everywhere, from explosion hazards, fire hazards, slippery surfaces, trip hazards, goodness knows what. But because of the professionalism of the health and safety people in that industry, there are lots of hazards, but they're very well managed, and therefore, minimizes the danger. When you come to look at hazards, it's very easy to focus, frankly, on the trivial. And this is where I think a lot of the criticism of the health and safety industry comes in. What this matrix does, it gives you a tool for judging hazards. On the left-hand side, you've got major, serious, minor, and trivial. That's the effect of the hazard. And along the bottom, you've got the probability of it happening, almost never through to very likely. And so, for example, at the top right-hand corner, you've got a major effect, which is very likely. Clearly, that needs to be managed and managed well. And the objective is to move that hazard from the top right down towards the bottom left. So if you can get that hazard down into the trivial almost never box, so much the better. You're trying to move the hazard down from that top right corner down to the left, bottom left. And similarly with all the other hazards. So it gives you a sort of feel as to which hazards are really important and which ones you need to be looking at most importantly. So how serious is a risk? Risk is, well, it's a bit mathematical this, but hazard is probability times its effect. So if it's high probability and disastrous, clearly that's very high risk. If it's low probability and almost no effect, then it's low risk. And there's a little cartoon, which I hope you can see that. It basically says, they've just invented the wheel and decided they need some sort of health and safety procedure for it. So the aim of safety management, to make an event as safe as reasonably practical. So if you're running a special event station, you need to look at the hazards and what can you reasonably do to make it as safe as possible. Again, some of the press reports on health and safety stress that some things are not reasonable and shouldn't be done. And to maintain an acceptable safety hazard, even when things change, it's very easy to start off with a plan for say a special event station or a contest station. And then, so you do your risk assessment, everything's nice and hunky-dory, and then things change. When things change, you need to go back and just review what's, whether it's affected the safety or not of the, might actually sometimes changes might actually make things safer, but usually they don't. They introduce new hazards that have not been thought about or managed. So always be aware when you're doing an event, if things change, review it. Change, review. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just going to very quickly outline what health and safety in the law is. But I stress I'm not a lawyer and I can't give any legal advice on this, but this is my understanding of health and safety law. The key thing in the law is the Health and Safety at Work Act. And of course, this applies to places of work. It's designed to protect employees and visitors to workplaces. It does not apply in private homes, but there is a general duty of care there, which is slightly more woolly and slightly more vague, but it doesn't actually apply in private homes. That doesn't mean you can ignore safety at home. And it may apply to, say, a special event station you're doing if it's held in a place of work, for example, a school or a museum or somewhere like that. If it's a place of work, then we would come under the umbrella of the Health and Safety at Work Act. And the employer's duty in the Act is to provide, well, this is pretty obvious, provide a safe working environment. They have to appoint a competent person responsible and have a written policy and carry out risk assessments. Now, the nice thing about them having a competent person, if we're going to do a special event station in, say, a museum, there will be an appointed health and safety person. And it's a very good idea to talk to them very early on and to get them on board with what we're doing, and listen to their concerns and what they're worried about, and to work with them to generate a risk assessment document. So yeah, the health and safety person isn't an enemy, they're your friend. And yeah, the essence of the Act is to provide as safe as reasonably practical. Risks have to be identified and managed, and they have to be assessed and reviewed regularly. So again, this is about change. So if things change, you assess and review. One thing it doesn't do, it doesn't make accidents illegal, contrary to popular myth. And even if you're in an environment where the Act doesn't apply, it's actually quite sensible to act as if it did. Right, now I'm going to talk about risk assessments. And this is one of the key things about health and safety planning is your risk assessment. When we're doing a special event, we go to a heck of a lot of trouble to work out which rigs are we going to use, operating rotors, what coax we're going to use, which antennas, which logging system, etc., etc. But we also need to think about build into the planning safety, so that we don't ignore that. Now, a risk assessment is not a form-filling exercise. I don't know if you can see that cartoon at the bottom there. You've got a guy sitting there, rubber stamps, going banned, banned, banned. That's not what it's about. It's not about stopping things. It's about managing things so that they're safe. And a risk assessment should be a practical document appropriate to the activity. If it's not practical, if it's too long, if it's too wordy, if it's too vague, nobody will use it. It's a document that's supposed to be used during the build up to the event, during the event itself. So it has to be a very practical document. It's there to improve the safety of potentially hazardous activities. So what you need to do is identify and analyze the hazards, identify actions to reduce them, and an action plan if there is an accident, because even with the best of planning, accidents can happen. And of course, the objective is to reduce the chances of an accident and the effects if there is one. It doesn't have to be written down, strangely enough, but there are lots of advantages to actually having a written document. First one, which certainly applies to me, I'm afraid, is clarity of thought. If you write something down, as you write it down, you think, hang on, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's rubbish. Then you can go back and rethink it. So writing your thoughts down on safety certainly helps clarify things. Saves time and effort next time. So if you're doing a similar exercise next year, or you get the old risk assessment out and review it, and it would be a lot quicker than starting from scratch. If it's a good idea with your risk assessment is to get somebody else independent, maybe somebody, a member of another club, to review it. And that's much easier with a written document, and actually it can save hours of tedious meetings. And also shows a professional approach. I believe amateur radio is amateur only in the sense that we don't get paid. I believe that we have to have a professional approach to everything we do. And particularly if we're trying to persuade, say, for example, the school to run a special event station for us, we need to show a professional approach, and a written risk assessment it goes a long way towards doing that. You may actually have to do one if you're running an event in the place of work, which we said earlier may be required by the responsible person. So, and also a written risk assessment can be reviewed very easily if things change. So change tends to creep up on us in these events. You know, when we're planning something, we start off with an initial plan, and then gradually things creep in, and potentially with them new hazards. Right, I'm just going to quickly run. I mean, I'm sure you all know these, but I'm going to quickly run through a few of the hazards that we come across. Loose cables in walkways, trip hazard. I've actually seen special event station with cables across the doorway. At the place of work, interestingly, slips and trips are the most common hazard and most common cause of accidents in workplaces. So be careful about trip hazards. Falling objects, things falling from heights, etc. Falling from a height, as you said earlier, Nick, about going up on your ladder. Falling from height is another major cause of accidents in the workplace. So you do need proper procedures if you're using towers, ladders, etc., or if you're working on a roof. I'll just pop up there and quickly secure that coax. Then you forget, slip and fall off backwards, and next thing you know, you're in intensive care. Portable generators. Oh, now these are a lot of fun. These are a source of lots of hazards. First, obviously, fire, carbon monoxide poisoning, and electric shock. So they should always be used in an open space and in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, particularly the earthing arrangements. And similarly, the fuel for your generator needs to be stored properly, preferably not next to the smoking area. Wet surfaces, slip hazard, again, slips and trips, very, very common in the workplace. Electrical faults, shock and fire, I don't need to tell you anything about that. Sharp objects, tools, cable ends, etc. Soldering irons. Anybody here not know that soldering irons are hot? Hazardous substances, glue, resin, solder, all that kind of stuff, need to be handled properly. If you're running a special event or any sort of station, lightning. Last year, I do the activity contests on 277 meters and had a good weather forecast. But as I was operating one day last summer, I saw a very dark cumulonimbus cloud approaching. Wasn't supposed to be there, but it was. Checked my lightning detector thing on my phone, and sure enough, it contained lightning. Next thing I heard, heard thunder rumbles. Now that's the point where the antennas came down and I sat in the car. Fortunately, it whisked through pretty quick and I only lost about half an hour's operating, but always be aware of lightning. It can creep up on you unexpectedly, especially if you're doing a big pile up and you're not looking outside. And of course, overhead power cables. Never ever put an antenna up anywhere near an overhead power cable. Even if the antenna doesn't actually touch the power cable, it can still flash over. And not entirely obvious, but high noise levels. When we're operating, very easy, isn't it? When you've got a pilot, you're trying to pull out that weak call sign, you just turn the volume up a little bit and still can't get it up. It goes a bit more and a bit more. And you're now at the point where you could potentially damage your hearing. So just remember that volume control is bi-directional. It turns down as well as up. So when you finish working that difficult contact, just turn it back down again to a comfortable level. Right, risks and how you manage them. The most obvious thing to say is, well, get rid of it. So if you can remove a hazard, then it goes away and you don't need to worry about it anymore. So that's planning and maintenance as well. So that clapped out old winch that you've used for years and years and years is starting to become a hazard. So get it maintained and get it certified, so you get rid of the hazard that way. If you can't get rid of it, limit access to the hazard. So this is about barrier tape, machine guards, rules, etc. So you're trying to limit people's access to that hazard. If you can't do that, increase awareness. So this is about notices, training, team briefings, etc. Failing that, you then need to increase protection. So this is RCDs, insulating mats, personal protection equipment, etc. And finally, and hopefully never ever to be used, the accident plan. clearly signed exits, fire extinguishers, first aid kits, knowing how you get an ambulance onto site. If you're working at Oswald's farm, it's no good calling the emergency services and saying we're at Oswald's farm. If that happens to be 1,000-hectare spread with multiple entrances, you need to be very clear about how the ambulance or indeed the fire engine would get to your site. And again, this is down to planning. Right, so just a quick outline of what a risk assessment is. It's specific description of the event. Where is it? Who will be there? And what activities will be undertaken? And from that, you can draw up a hazard table of likely hazards. You would need to identify the hazards, identify the actions, and name somebody who will deal with it. So somebody is responsible for a particular hazard. Say, for example, cable layout. Fred can do cable layout or whatever. Review the risk assessment before, during, and after the event, and especially if things change. And there's just a one page of cables across the doorways. That's the plan at the moment. High risk of tripping. Bob's going to sort that out. Fire equipment. Check cables, fire extinguisher, electrical equipment. Make sure escape routes are clear. Dave can do that. Antenna collapse. Use barrier tape around the drop zone, so if it does collapse, nobody's inside. Check guidelines regularly, etc. And Chris can do that. And so it goes on and on and on. So you identify the hazards, what you're going to do about it, who's going to do it, and also a date as well when it's finished. Right, I've got a quiz for you now. I'll take your answers in the second part. So this is the scenario. You've got a field day. You've done a risk assessment. It's private field. Club members will be there, maybe a few family members, but 2 days before the event, scout leader calls. Can he bring his troop along? What do you say? That's I'll take your answers later, but do you say, yeah, no problem, bring them along? No, you can't. Health and safety reasons, mate. No, it can't be done. Or do you say, should be okay, but let's review our risk assessment and see what needs to change? So is it 1, 2, or 3? I'll ask you later. So do pay attention. Final thoughts on hazards. Never, ever walk past a hazard. And again, I've seen this happen on amateur radio stations. There's a clear hazard there and somebody walks past it. No, I'm doing the VHF station. That's the HF station, nothing to do with me. And there's a potential accident. So do something before somebody gets hurt. If you see a hazard that's not being managed, act. Right, next thing I'm going to talk about is personal protection equipment. And in the second part, I'll show you my stuff. It is not a substitute for safe working, no more than seatbelts are a substitute for safe driving. It's the last line of defense. When everything else has failed, that's when your PPE kicks in. Now, the first time you use it, if you've not used it before, you will feel self-conscious. There's no doubt about that. But you'll very quickly get over this. And actually, it'll go the other way around. If you're on the site where PPE is mandatory and you're not wearing it, you feel very self-conscious. Start with, just run through a few of them. I won't do them all, but hard hats, iconic health and safety symbol. I think a better name for them is energy absorbing hats. Now, an impact of 50 joules energy can fracture an adult skull, much less for a juvenile. And that's just a weight of 2.5 kilograms falling 2 meters. The effect of the hard hat is to lower the energy, absorb the energy, but it can still cause serious injury. I've had one occasion myself when I was wearing a hard hat and something fell on my head, and believe me, it hurts. And I was actually injured, but fortunately not seriously. If I hadn't been wearing a hard hat, I very much doubt if I'd be here today. So they do have their uses. So it absorbs some of the energy, it spreads the load, making skull fracture less likely, but believe me, it still hurts. Now, say 2.5 kilograms falling 2 meters. Wonder how much that beam and rotator weighs. Bet it's more than 2.5 kilograms. High-vis jackets, another emblematic health and safety symbol. You should certainly wear them if you're working close to moving vehicles, or if you're working on things in poor light. I've read far too many accident reports which have something in them like, I didn't see him till it was too late, because the guy was wearing dark overalls or whatever in poor light, and forklift drivers simply didn't see him, and it's too late then. They're also quite useful because they're instant ID, so you can mark them with the club logo. If you've got a corporate sponsor paying for your event, you can put their stuff on it, their advertising stuff on it, etc. And also they're useful in the fact that if somebody's wandering around, say, in the antenna vicinity without a high-vis jacket, they simply shouldn't be there. So you can act straight away. Say you're running an event, lots of visitors, they will stray into your antenna area even if it's taped off. But if you see somebody in that area who's not wearing high-vis, you can get them out quick. The other thing is, if you pay more, a bit more for a less, not the basic one, but slightly more elaborate one, have lots of pockets, which is dead handy when you're building a station or taking it down, putting connectors in the pockets, small tools, etc. So they've got more than one use. Then you've got things like eye shields. It's pretty obvious if there's particles or sharp objects, wear them. And just a few other items. Dust masks, if you're working in a dusty environment. Safety boots. They used to look horrible. Used to like club nail boots. You can get some very stylish ones now, and actually you can get safety trainers which look very stylish. You might think, oh, I don't need those, but believe me, if you drop a scaffolding pole on your foot and you're not wearing safety boots, that's going to be you out of action for a few weeks. Injuries to the foot are very painful, and if you're using in like a mower, electric mower or something, do wear them because toes are not easy to sew back on. Gloves, if you're handling glass or other sharp things or chemicals, you need gloves. And the PPE should be appropriate. I don't believe you should have like a blanket rule that everybody must wear hard hats and high vis and gloves and goggles and all the rest of it. You should scale the PPE to be appropriate to the risk and the risk of the event and what's happening at a particular time, as determined by the risk assessment. And that's me, as we say in the industry, booted and suited. Before we leave, yes, it's about health and safety, just a few sort of health pointers. Amateur radio is generally a sedentary hobby, not always. I apologize to anybody who does SOTA and POTA and so on. But usually it's, we're sitting around not doing a lot. Special events, contests, etc. Get up and walk around at least once an hour, or preferably organize your rosters so that people only operate for an hour at a time. It's difficult, even if you have a massive pile up, to think, oh, I'm gonna have a break. But what I've found is if you announce QRX 5 minutes, usually people will stay with you, and your pile up will still be there when you get back. So you can get up, you can walk about, stretch your legs, have a drink of water, cup of tea, whatever. If you expect to operate for long periods, do check the seating. All too often at contests and special events, we use camping stools or camping chairs. They're not comfortable and they're not suitable for long-term sitting. So do check and check the equipment layout. Make sure that the computer's at the right height. The screen's not lit, etc. So check before you start. And if you do start feeling neck and back pain or muscle pain, then something's wrong. Fix it before you do yourself some damage. And just be aware of hazardous substances. I mean, we don't use a lot of these, but things like glues, solders, etc., should be used in ventilated spaces in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and wash your hands afterwards before you have that cheese sandwich. And avoid, as I think I covered this before, avoid prolonged exposure to high noise levels. Do turn the volume down, otherwise, you could do serious damage to your hearing. Unfortunately, accidents will happen. So, you need to plan for these as well as planning for the event. So ensure you've got your safety equipment there. First aid kits, fire extinguishers are in good working order and in the right place. When that old power pack bursts into flames, it's no good saying, now, where did we put the fire extinguisher? It was here somewhere. It was here yesterday. No, it needs to be in one particular place where everybody knows where it is. regularly check emergency exit routes that are clear and well marked, particularly if you've got public coming to your station. Plan for emergency service access. Use either the postcode of somewhere near the access point or what 3 words. And also just know where your nearest A&E, minor injuries unit, for pharmacy, etc. are, and what the opening hours are. So that if somebody does have an accident, you're not floundering around looking on Google with no signal to try and find out, where's the nearest place to go to. So that's just, again, an example of planning. And if there is an accident, obviously, first thing to minimize casualties, avoid damage, and avoid taking personal risks. Treat anyone who's injured and don't hesitate to call the emergency services if it's serious. Collect all the information you need for the insurance claim, because that's the next tedious thing coming up. Photos, statements, etc. Thing about safety as well with amateur radio. At the moment, we've got a good reputation, and if there was to be a succession of accidents concerning amateur radio, then our insurance premiums will go up. You do need to notify the insurance company as soon as possible, even if you don't think there'll be a claim. You need to notify them the accident's happened. And you can always tell them later, okay, we're not proceeding with the claim, and that's fine. If it's something very serious and the press contact you, this can be very, very stressy. I've only once been in this situation myself. They're very pushy. Their job is to get a story. They want nothing better than something spectacular for the evening news. So you need to be as polite as possible, give them as little information as you can. Something like, yes, there's been an incident here today. We're looking into it. We'll let you know when we've got the facts. What you don't do is you don't push the cameraman out the way, because that will definitely get you on the evening news. If you're just very polite and just don't say as little as possible, then you won't even get quoted. That's not a story to them. And also remember, they're not your friends. They will try and get around you and say, oh, yeah, we're just off the record. Could you just tell us what happened? Yeah, just so I get a bit of context. No, you don't tell them anything, even if they're being very pally and very friendly. So they're not your friends, I'm afraid. And you can always contact the RSGB press office if you need professional advice, which you may do in some circumstances. But hopefully we'll never get to that point. All your good planning and all the preparation means that you'll never have an accident like that. So further information, the Health and Safety Executive website is very, very good. It obviously relates to work, but also contains a lot of good practice. And I'd recommend that you visit that regularly, and especially before you plan an event, because health and safety information does change. So that's the end of my presentation. So what do you want to do now, Nick? Do you want to take a 10-minute break?
No, we'll go straight into questions and comments, Dave. So thank you very much. That was really interesting. Hope everyone followed it and enjoyed it. Dave, are you going to do that quiz? Just put the question out again. Just see who's on your 3 options.
Yeah, it was. Let's get the sharing back up. What have you got? PowerPoint, come on. Oh, PowerPoint. Oh, there we are. Right, it was somewhere down here, wasn't it? Oh, yes, there we are. Right, so here we are. You planned your event. It's going to be in a private field, so there won't be any members of the public present. Club members, maybe the odd family member. And then 2 days before, scout leader calls, can you bring your troop? How many people would reply, yeah, no problem, bring them along? Hands up. Sorry, I need to just close that screen so I can see the rest of you. No takers for that one. How many would say, no, mate, can't be done, health and safety reasons? Hands up. No takers. And who would say, yeah, should be all right, but we need to review the risk assessment with you. So how many think that's a good idea? Yeah, good, nice show of hands. Excellent. Okay, right.
Thank you, Dave.
So,
yeah, that was very good. That was in the famous words of the TV show. That was a yeah, but answer.
yeah, but no, but yeah, but.
Yes. Okay, who wants to kick off with a observation, question, comment?
Or if anybody's got any actual events themselves that they want to share with us, anonymously, of course.
Well, I'm going to share one on behalf of our member Ken, G4VZV, who operates a lot out in Spain, in Alicante, as EA5 stroke G4VZV, and he has an amazing time. But there are several risks that he's got operating by himself, portable, by the sea or by the salt lagoons. One of them, of course, and this applies to us increasingly in Britain, is the hazard of sun in the summer months if you're operating outside.
Yeah,
And it's not just a question of making sure you've put a bit of sunblock on, but making sure you are properly covered up. And if you can operate on the radio in a place where you've got shelter, that's better than being outside. But also making sure you've got enough fluids to drink while you're out there, because you can very quickly become dehydrated, and that can cause you having an accident. So that's one of the things that Ken's talked about from his time of operating in Spain, where he's regularly operating in temperatures exceeding 40 degrees in very, very strong sunshine outside. And we're increasingly now coming across those temperatures, not all the time, of course, but we're getting some very, very high temperatures in the UK for periods of time. We did this year, and in Ireland and Scotland and so on. We in Germany and Belgium, where some of our members are as well, similar there. So that's something I know Ken would have talked about tonight if he was there. And the other thing that sounds slightly off kilter, but one or two people who are in the club WhatsApp group may remember Ken posted a fabulous, I mean, he keeps posting his recordings of his QSOs working DX, doesn't he? With his, 50 watts into a 16-foot aluminium pole by the sea, nothing more than that. And he's working into the Pacific station after station. But he was out there not that long ago, earlier this year, and the conditions were he was down operating in the salt lagoons. First thing he realised when he tried to go outside to operate was the mosquitoes come up at night time in their millions, and he realised it wasn't going to be conceivable that he could stay there for any length of time with those mosquitoes. He would be absolutely bitten by them. And of course, in countries like Spain, as increasingly in Britain, the risks of all kinds of diseases being carried by mosquitoes. So he decided to operate in the car. Safe, you would think. And I heard him working a VK station, and he said they were working on this call, and the VK station said to him, "It must be very late for you, Ken." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "it's 4 o'clock in the morning here." He said, "I've had such great fun, and I've been working DX all night long. I just couldn't put the radio down, but I'm going to make you my last QSO." He said that the only thing that worries me is I've got to get out of the car. So the VK said to him, "Why is that a problem, Ken?" He said, "Well, there's two problems I'm facing here. One is that the place is absolutely covered in mosquitoes, and I've shut off the air coming into the car so we don't get mosquitoes in the car. But as soon as I open the door, I'm going to be confronted with them. And the other problem," he said, "is that we do have a lot of poisonous snakes up here. And all I've got is my torch. So as soon as I stand out by myself on this, bit of grass next to the road here, I could well be stepping onto a snake that I would see during the day, but I wouldn't see at night time." So this the VK he was working was quite concerned about Ken, and he said, "Well, I wish I could stay on the radio to make sure you've done this safely, but of course I can't, because you've got to get out to take the antenna down and pack stuff away back into your car." Ken obviously was okay, but it does make you, from what your presentation, Dave, point I'm making for those 2 points about Ken, is that when you're operating, particularly as a lone operator, not in an environment, when you talked rightly about, inviting the local scouts along to come and join us in an activity that we didn't expect to have 25 enthusiastic 13-year-old kids running around, putting everything apart and doing what they do. But putting that to one side, we all end up doing things, sometimes by ourselves at home, sometimes outside, on a hill, on a summit of a hill, by the sea, by a lake, wherever it might be. And there are different hazards that we face there. And I think what your presentation did tonight for me, and I'm certain that I'm only expressing the points that Ken would have raised if he was been here tonight. We've all got to think about those things that apply to us where we are at that point of time. And Ken, by the way, had a very nasty accident about a year ago, operating by himself out in the sun in Spain, where as he was walking back to his car after he'd finished operating, pushing his trolley along, he just keeled over and smacked his head on the concrete and ended up in hospital. Thankfully, no more than having to have stitches in his head. But he and the hospital thought it was more than likely that it was the effect of standing out in the sun for the period of time he'd been operating that led him to have that fall. And it made Ken have to think about, I'm going to have to think about how I do this in the future to avoid something that could have been even worse than what he faced. So Dave, I think, it's interesting, aren't there, that your approach is about approaches, but we can bring that approach, whether we're by ourselves at home, whether we're by ourselves in some other location, we can bring that same method of working that you talked about there to there, can't we?
Yeah, that's thanks for sharing that, because that's a very good point. That being out in the sun for long periods of time, there's obviously the the sunburn risk, which is very painful, potentially doing skin damage that could in the long term lead to skin cancer, which is very unpleasant, if not fatal. And there are things you can do about it. I mean, like sunblock, etc., working in the shade, and covering up with factor 50 clothing, etc. But again, that's a case in point where you might plan to do a SOTA activation. Weather forecast says it's going to be a nice day, but cloudy and all the rest of it. You actually get onto the summit and something's changed. The forecast was wrong. And it actually turns out to be brilliant sunshine all day. And you think, well, what shall I do? There's no shelter here. I didn't bring the sunblock with me. My clothing doesn't really cover me that well. What are you going to do? That's where you then think, well, something's changed here and made the operation a lot more hazardous. And you're going to do yourself serious damage if you sit out all day on a hilltop in the bright sunshine. Similarly with the mozzies, you can. I've actually had this in Scotland when I've gone out and done a portable operation in Scotland, where I wasn't expecting it, but when I got to site, they were horrible. The midges were everywhere, and I had to give up. Operated for about an hour, but then thought, well, this just isn't worth it. I'm going to get bitten to death here if I'm not careful. And I've never come across snakes though when I've been operating, but like I say, if you're in an environment that there are snakes, then that clearly is a hazard, and clearly you need to do something about it. As for the fall, I mean, obviously I don't know the circumstances, but it seems to me very likely that dehydration and getting too hot in the sun could have been a factor. So just monitor your own physical well-being. If you start to feel a bit fuzzy, a bit unwell, even if you've got a huge, great pile up, forget it.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Henry and Amanda, you put your hands up, and then George. Henry, Amanda?
Yes, well, almost as a tail end of what you just said, remember we do it as a hobby. Don't be distracted by your clobber and your equipment. There are other things going on around you.
It is a hobby, and as I said in the presentation, amateur radio is, it's amateur in the sense that we don't get paid. That still means that but I take your point that you don't want to over plan and over.
No, that wasn't my point. My point was, if your radio is falling down, but somebody else has got another problem, the radio's secondary.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that at all. So be doing it. There's a case a few years ago where a young lady was doing a SOTA activation, and came, I can't quite remember the exact circumstances, but she came across somebody who'd fallen and broken the leg. So of course, SOTA activation goes out the window at that point. And it's deal with the casualty.
Well, just something about being out in the sun. If you are in the Mediterranean area, or perhaps here now that we get the sort of heat waves we do, don't be fooled by the cloud.
Yeah.
I got
Good
caught.
point.
I got caught in Malta years ago, and it was March, late March, and there was no sun at all, and I was burned raw within 2 hours being out. I wasn't doing radio, but
Yeah,
I would just point that out, that it doesn't mean the sun is not belting away out behind that cloud.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And sort of if you start to feel sunburn, it's already too late. Get into the shade quick. I mean, on the BBC weather app, it does actually give you a UV index. I mean, quite how reliable that is, I don't know. But you're quite right. Sometimes when it's a cloudy day, you have a very high UV index and the potential for sunburn. So, just be aware of your own physical well-being and feelings. If you start feeling sunburn, get the hell out of it.
Okay, thank you for those comments and questions. George.
Yes, thank you. Just to add to what Amanda just said. Well, sometimes you don't actually feel how hot the sun is, even if there's a slight breeze going. You don't feel how hot the sun is, but so it's very easy to burn. But what I was actually going to say is something which we've got some lone working procedures at my workplace, and that's something which also applies to any like SOTA or POTA activation or anywhere like where you're going out activating on your own. Let someone know where you're going and when you want to be back.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's general mountain safety. That you should, if you are going out on your own, make sure that somebody knows. And that photo of me with me PPE on, etc. That was in Spain on a site with very little shelter. The rule there was that when the temperature went over 33 degrees centigrade, work stopped. Everybody had to come off site and wait for the temperature to drop. But there again, sunburn was a serious problem there. Especially you had to wear PPE. You couldn't always, wear a sort of hat with, shelters to the back of your neck. So had to be very careful, but still managed to get, some sunburn.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add something which is relatively common, I think, the hazard of using radials when going out into the fields. Of course, you have to use them, but something dangerous can come from them. We had an experience once being in the field away from ways and pathways and so on, putting up a vertical antenna with a radio, and out of nowhere, two dogs appeared and began chasing themselves around the antenna and going through the radios. We put the antenna down immediately and separated the radios. The dogs were not harmed. There was someone who came after them, the owner, who had not got them on a line as it should be in this, or should have been in this part of the region there, but let them roam free, and everything was okay. But it could have been very quickly a very awkward situation, I think. So I can't see what we could have done to prevent this, otherwise than using no radios, of course. But something can always crop up from practically nowhere and bring you into a difficult or delicate situation there.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that's that could happen, in any walk of life. Something comes out of left field that you weren't expecting, and you just got to manage it as best you can. I mean, hopefully the dogs didn't actually bite anybody, but that's a possibility. Again, that Spanish project I did one of the places we had to work was right next to a fence belonging to a hostile farmer, and he had very, very savage dogs. Fortunately, they never got out, but yeah, that was very scary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean,
other thing,
our problem, I think, which is what Mike was alluding to there, Dave, is that, when we're going out to operate radio, the
Yeah,
chances are we're setting up an outside aerial. I mean, that might just be, a 10-meter pole that we've attached to something, or it might be a 10-meter pole we've guyed to support a wire, either going up it or from it. And of course, we've then got wires going back from the feed point of the antenna to our radios. So we've got around us, we've got an environment that might be
yeah,
absolutely beautiful and lovely, but suddenly something comes in Mike's case, a couple of dogs running around that could, get hurt by getting tripped in the wires, or pull a wire and it breaks the radio, or pulls the
yeah,
antenna down. All those sorts of things are
yeah.
factors that we've got to just keep being aware, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I do the 2 meter 77s activity contest, I go out onto, Blackheath near here. Couple of hazards there. One is runners. I'm operating off the path, but runners, as you know, tend to take shortcuts. And one night, a lady almost tripped over my guy wire because it was just going dark and she didn't see it, and she stopped and said to me, "You foolish person," or well, words to that effect. Um, anyway, since then, what I've done is I've bought some of these, these flashy lights that bike riders use. I bought a set of those, and I now put a red flashing light at the end of the guy lines, so that they are visible to runners, so that they can see that. The other hazard, not dissimilar to your dogs, where I operate Southeast London, you get quite a lot of yobbos. And obviously they see my aerials and they see what's going on. They come over and they have a chat, and sometimes they're a bit stroppy, but they generally you can soon talk them round when you just say, well, actually it's a bit like CB radio, and they've all heard of that, and then you get into a conversation. I've never had any real trouble with them, but it is a potential hazard. So the way I set it up is I keep the radio in the back of the car, so I could quickly shut the door and lock it if I need to. I mean, okay, they could steal the aerial, but that wouldn't be a huge loss. So yeah, each environment has different hazards, and the whole idea of planning is to think about those hazards and to think about what you can do about them, if anything.
Yeah, Mike.
yeah, and what you said about sudden changes of the weather, the climate, is also very common, I think. We had one experience in this field, being on a small hill, putting up a vertical, and everything was fine. The weather prediction was excellent. There wasn't even some rain to come, but we just looked into one direction. And when we looked back behind our backs, so to speak, out of nowhere, black clouds had arrived very quickly, I have to say that. And very soon they came near and brought the danger of thunder and lightning with them. So we had to pack up and get down the hill very quickly. All was well. But we have experienced very often now, especially in this summer, that the prediction of weather is not correct and not to be relied upon. Especially the appearance of sudden thunderstorms and lightnings has been very often here in our part of the world anyway. And it never was predicted on the radio or on a weather forecast otherwise. So that's something you have always to take into calculation, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that was what happened to me last year doing the activity contest. No storm forecast, but one literally sneaked up on me. What I do is I have on my phone, I've got the lightning tracker app, which you can very quickly check whether there is lightning coming your way. But general rule of thumb, if you can hear the thunder you're in the strike zone. So get your aerials down fast as soon as you hear thunder. And if you've got an app that which will show you when lightning's coming, then get your aerials down before the lightning arrives. And if you are in an exposed place, if you've got your car nearby, get in the car. If not, just when a storm comes up on you, the only thing you can do is lie flat or like crouch down somewhere, so you're not a high profile strike target. But I agree, lightning can be very dangerous, and it is getting far more commonplace. And certainly, it was very common when I lived in the US in New Jersey. There's a lot of thunderstorms and things there in the summer, and it seems to be going that way here as well. So, yeah, so that, you're quite right, very dangerous, and you need to act very quickly if a storm does sneak up on you.
Yeah, the other thing, Dave, of course, for people who enjoy walking up hills is, and unless you've learnt this through being, I've done climbing for many years, so known this a long time, but people who don't do it very often are surprised at the temperature difference between the base and the top. So, you haven't got to go very far up. I mean, I think the rule of thumb is 1 centigrade drop for every 100 meters of height from where you were previously. So you haven't got to be up on a massively high location for the weather on the top to be very different from what it is on the ground.
No, you're quite right. A recent experience of that, I was on holiday with my grandson in the summer, and the place where we were was down at in the valley, as it were. The temperature was 35 degrees. He wanted to go up this ski lift thing right up to the top of the mountain. Got to the top of the mountain, and it was 3 degrees.
Yeah.
And of course, I knew that when we made sure that we took sort of warm clothing with us. And when we were packing up to go up the mountain, he said, "What are you taking your woolies for? Don't be daft. We don't need those. It's blooming hot outside." I said, "You wait till we get to the top of the hill, mate." And it was 3 degrees at the top and 30 below. So it's a heck of a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've probably all been there at some time or another. Mike, I can trump your dogs. Where I live up in the Pennines here, about a 15-minute walk, I've got a lovely location on the Pennine Bridleway that's a designated park on the air. And there's a little hillock overlooking the pathway, so I can operate from there. Nice, quiet location, no hazards around, I thought, until I tromped up there earlier in the year, this year, to see a group of wild horses in the exact location where I was intending to operate from. So I decided discretion was the better part of valor, and to walk off and find another place where the wild horses weren't. But then even just last weekend, I was walking up on the Pennine Way, up from one of the reservoirs up here, and a very large group, a herd of cows came up out of the off the field and started to walk towards us. And you kind of know that you're probably going to be okay, but there can be a problem. Cows can get spooked, and there have been some very nasty accidents recorded in the UK this year where cows have attacked ramblers and hikers in locations, and we're not immune to that as radio amateurs. So it is. I think the problem, Dave, and other people have alluded to that as well, is that because we get so carried away with our radio, you on your activity contest, maybe one of us on POTA or SOTA, particularly on POTA, and you've been spotted, and you suddenly find yourself working a pile-up on CW or single sideband. It's fantastic fun to operate a pile-up, but in that moment of doing that, with all these stations calling you and trying to log all these QSOs, you can lose awareness, if you're by yourself, of actually what's going on around you, whether that's the weather, whether it is Mike's dogs, my cows, the wild horses, whatever it might be, that have suddenly come into your environment to make it a potentially hazardous environment. And so I think, not quite sure how we deal with that, other than to just keep telling ourselves, you must do it all the time, Dave, operating from Blackheath, just, enjoy the contest, but also, just make sure you're aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. In the airline industry, that's what's known as situation awareness. which pilots have to have at all times. They mustn't lose track of what's their situation. That's a very good example. That you can be so focused on the radio that you don't notice that big black cloud coming up, or that herd of cattle heading towards you, or in my case, a group of yobbos walking up. So you do need to have situation awareness at all times. I agree with that.
Mike again.
Only as a sideline, Nick, from statistics, I know that the most dangerous animal in Germany, anyway, who is responsible for most of deadly accidents with animals, is a cow.
Yeah.
That's not to be underestimated,
Yeah, very much so,
obviously.
Yeah, when we walk past these cows, and you're just aware of how powerful these animals are. They're so big and they're so heavy, and potentially very powerful, that they can, you can see why people do get killed by them. So yeah, I agree. Yes, Mike, Keith.
Yeah, hi there, Dave. Excellent talk. I've been in the health and safety arena for 21 years before I retired 7 years ago as principal officer. And everything you said was perfect. It was nicely put together. It wasn't over-emphasized and complicated, the sorts of things that I had to do for my arena. I've got a couple of little pointers here. One was, you're talking about near misses. I have done no end of near miss analysis in my career, because, as you quite rightly say, people will pass on the other side of the road or walk past it or ignore it. And then somebody else gets injured, of course. We did have, Jim will probably remember this, when back in the early 80s, we used to run RITI contests for the Worthing Radio Club on Ditchlin Beacon, which is about 800 feet up, I think. And we put up, I think we had a 60-foot tower with twin aerials on the top. But there were also radio-controlled glider guys there. And one guy decided he wanted to use our mast as a turning point. What he forgot about was the guy wires. So his very expensive radio-controlled, must have been about a 10-foot wingspan model, decided to destroy itself on our guy lines after we'd told him numerous times to stay away, and we got signs up as well. But you can't teach some people. It's crazy. But high-vis jackets, one thing I would say about those, keep them in your car, because if you break down, they can be a lifesaver on the road, for sure. And hard hats, in the working arena, they have a limited lifespan, and there is a date moulded into the hat itself, which is the expiry date from when the supplier will no longer be responsible for anything should it deteriorate badly. And my other passion was display screen equipment. So getting, as you quite rightly say, get your computer equipment set up correctly. And if you are getting problems in your neck and shoulders, etc., you're either looking down too much or you're looking up too much. You want to make sure that your screen, when you're sitting comfortably, the top of your screen should be about probably an inch lower than your eye line, or level with your eye line, because your eyes naturally rest in a downward position. So that's one thing there. And the last thing, I've got to admit this, when I went away for a couple of weeks down to my daughter's and to Jim's for a week. And when I got back, my other half told me off because I'd laid the DX Commander down, and where the 3 stakes are in the grass, I put big white stones so that she could see them, and didn't realise in 2 weeks the grass grows quite a lot. She fell over one of them. So I admit that one. So, and normally I have little plastic flower pots that I peg down with pieces of bamboo, but the dog had destroyed all those by chewing them up and chasing them around the garden. So
I can recommend.
I didn't have to write it up though, fortunately.
Yeah, I can recommend red flashing lights are the answer to that.
Yeah, I thought about that one. That's a great idea, I must admit.
Yeah.
And the only other thing, you worked on the offshore industry. one of the things I used to do for county in Somerset was train for the health and safety diploma, and the Piper Alpha was the
Yeah.
situation that I spent. I think it was about 4 weeks talking it through with the delegates. So yeah, that was quite an impressive event. I shall say no more.
Yeah, yeah. I see George has got his hand up. I'll hand over to you in a moment, George. But just answer those points. Yeah, near misses. Yeah, I mean, a radio club I used to belong to had absolutely classic near miss. Special event station, putting up the HF antenna. The base plate slipped. At that point, they managed to, catch the antenna. It didn't do any damage. Everyone had a good laugh. Oh, isn't that funny? Ha ha. Nobody did anything. When it came to taking the station down, which by the way is a very dangerous time because everyone's tired, everyone wants to get home. Taking the station down, the base plate slipped again, as inevitably it would. This time it was far more serious. The large HF antenna crashed into somebody's car. Damaged the roof of the car and also wrote the antenna off. So if they'd taken note of the near miss at the start of the operation, that wouldn't have happened. They'd have done something about it. Hard hats, yeah, very good point about the date. I've actually got my hard hat here. Hang on a minute. The other thing about hard hats is that they do need to be adjusted correctly. They've got these straps inside. There are loads of, is that in focus? Yeah, that's better. There are loads of videos on YouTube, etc., showing you how to do it. And when you buy a new one, they come with instructions. They do have to be adjusted correctly, otherwise they're not effective. Basically, they're adjusted so that the plastic insert just sits on your head and it's secure, but will absorb the energy. So do make sure your hard hat's adjusted correctly. And yeah, Piper Alpha. Yeah, when I joined the oil and gas business, my first week there I was a contractor, and the HR came up to me and said, you're doing a training course. I said, well, no, I'm not a contractor. We don't do training courses. Yes, you are. And it was 3 days reviewing Piper Alpha, and that was a very, very instructive for me. Things went on, as you well know, things went on that which were absolutely outrageous, and a few simple steps would probably have made it far less serious than it actually was. So yeah, Piper Alpha was if anybody just doesn't know, that was a gas rig in the North Sea that blew up, basically. Killed 230 people, was it, from memory? Something like that. A lot of people died who didn't need to.
187, I think.
187, was it? Okay, yeah.
187.
Yeah, absolutely tragic and should never have happened. So, that's a big learning exercise for the oil and gas business. Right, so George, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick question to either of you, Dave or Keith. With the lifespan of a hard hat, how long is the lifespan of a hard hat? Because I feel I need to replace mine at some point.
Yes, somewhere inside there'll be a date. Yeah, mine expires actually the end of this year. I think is it about 6 years, I think. But I think that's how long?
It's like 5 or 6 years.
Because I've got a date in mind which I think was the production date, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if it's more than 5 years old, I'd think about replacing it. And certainly if you had an accident that involved your hard hat,
yeah,
definitely replace it straight away.
Yeah. Same goes for motorcycle helmets, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, remember, hard hats are plastic, so they have the same lifespan as plastic does.
Yeah, don't leave them on the parcel shelf on the back of your car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also the high vis, they also come in jacket form, which is nice and comfortable and warm. So you don't just have the gilet type.
Yeah. And actually, you can get your full, overall high vis overalls if you really want to go that far. But amateur radio probably not needed.
Yeah, because amateur radio is a changing hobby as well, Dave. I mean, when I first
Mm.
came into the hobby, most people were using, well, mainly home built or old military
Yeah.
equipment with valves and high voltage in them. So everyone was used to using high voltage valves. We're not quite so used to that now. And I nearly had an accident a few years ago. I've got one of the Ameritron amplifiers with the 811 valves in. Lovely, lovely piece of equipment. And it's operated very well for quite a few years. I've been very pleased to use it from time to time. But one day one of the valves went, and I decided I wanted to find out which one it was, and the obvious way of doing it is to take the lid off and take out the valves one by one and see which is the defective valve, and then put it back. And the amplifier, like all those valve amplifiers, has got a little switch mechanism, so the high voltage won't be applied until the case is firmly on the switch. I'm not stupid enough to override that. But what I did do was and I've done it several. I mean, I've done this over my entire life of bugging around with valves and radios. You know, I wait a bit of time and, you know, wait for the voltage to dissipate in the capacitors at the anode of the valve, and then you know it's pretty safe and you can take it off and you're not in any danger. And this particular day, I think, I don't know why, I was trying to get it done too quickly, and I took the top off, not giving it time for the capacitors to discharge. Put my hand on the anode. Oh dear! I mean, that gave me a real. I mean, it wasn't live HT. This was voltage that was inside the capacitor, and it gave me a very, very nasty shock. I mean, it did chuck me across the room, and was quite painful as well. And I think I was very lucky that it obviously had dissipated some before I hit it. And you know, there is a danger for us when we try to, you know, rightly, this is, as you said, Dave, this is a hobby and we're amateurs, and so we try and mend things ourselves and we try and fix things ourselves. There is a, you know, we just have to be mindful, ultra mindful, I think, of the dangers of some of the equipment we're using. I mean, with a modern semiconductor amplifiers, it's less likely you're going to be delving into it to try and repair it, but you could still end up with a very nasty RF burn if you were to touch something with a kilowatt of power is coming out at HF, through the radio. So I think we as individuals, we have to be very mindful of that, don't we?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And basically, if you're not familiar with the equipment, don't try and do it yourself. Get somebody to help you who does know the equipment. And the other thing about it's good point about the modern equipment being transistorized and therefore low voltage. The flip side of that, of course, is that they draw a lot more current.
Yeah.
So the electric shock hazard has gone down, but the fire hazard has gone up, because you're not using the right cables. They're going to get hot and potentially burst into flames. So that's a case of where hazards get traded, if you like. You've traded off the high voltage risk, but brought in a new risk, which is the risk of fire.
Well, that Dave, that takes me on to another point, doesn't it? Of those of us that like buying bargains at radio rallies and on eBay or something, or from a member in the club who's picked up a few of them. It's the dangers of things like lithium batteries and charges for those batteries, both of which, even if you think you have bought equipment which is properly labelled with a proper name of a company on it, it may actually be the case it's not from that company. Someone's just spoofed something that looks like it. And I think we have to be very, very careful nowadays when we're charging up batteries, which are only producing relatively low amounts of current and low amounts of voltage that we might use to go and run a 5 watt or 10 watt portable station. The fact is that fire risk is very, very much there if those batteries start to swell, or you start to charge them improperly, or you use a charger which is actually not of the right quality. So I think that's something that we've all got to be aware of, because these batteries are now everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, and you're right. They do contain, even if they're low voltage, they still contain an awful lot of energy. And recent flights I've done, I've noticed they've changed the rules on that, that if you're carrying any battery equipment, you can't put it in check luggage anymore. It's got to go in your hand luggage, you know, so that if something does catch fire, at least you can get to it. So yeah, that's a very good point about the batteries. So that they do, you know, have well, I wouldn't say a big fire risk, but there is, that risk is there.
I mean, I guarantee to you, most people in this room, including our friends in Germany and Belgium and the US, have seen pictures of these in their local newspapers or on TV of an exploding, you know, lithium battery, probably not a radio amateur, you know, someone with one of these electric bikes that they've bought cheap from somewhere, and they're using a dodgy charger on it, and they've left it overnight to charge, and the thing explodes and starts a fire in their house or their flat. I mean, there have been some very, very nasty incidents, haven't there, involving these things?
Yeah, they have, and the certainly the London Fire Brigade have put out warnings. You know, do not store electric bikes on your escape route. You know, so you know, because if they do, then you're trapped. And they, you know, electric bike batteries particularly contain an awful lot of energy.
Yeah.
And ideally, don't charge your mobile phone on your bedstand at night
So,
next to you.
Which we all do.
Yeah.
Okay, Howard.
Oh, it's just a quickie for Dave and Keith. Many hundreds of years ago, when I did my NEBOSH training, I remember one of the lecturers saying, there is no such thing as an accident. It's cause and effect. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. If somebody's dropped a kettle on their foot or whatever, and you think, you know, put the kettle in the middle of the stand. Don't leave it hanging halfway over the table. You know,
Yeah.
people don't have enough. They don't have enough sense. I mean, I've spent, again, with the badge on your jacket there, Dave, I've spent 40 odd years with them. And it's like we said before, you're going up the mountain on your own. Why are you on your own? If you have to go on your own, let somebody know. But people are just not aware of danger. It's, you know, it's just too comfortable. And my friends, my friends, the few that I have, oh no, he's at it again. You know, he's lecturing us again. But common sense doesn't exist at the moment, I think, with a lot of people. But that's all it takes.
You're quite right. My mother-in-law used to say, you know, common sense isn't that common. But from our point of view, we need to be aware of if somebody else has created a hazard, you know, like the kettle on the edge of the worktop, whatever. Don't ignore it. Just do something about it. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll shut up now, and I'm going to say thanks for the talks tonight, lads. Going off to see what my other half is up to before she breaks the house.
Yeah, glad to meet another RNLI supporter. I've been an RNLI supporter since I was a kid, so that was a few years ago.
Me too. But we were talking of this the other day. The first time I was involved with that was standing on the street corner with my old man, and I was about 9 on a lifeboat day collecting. He was collecting the money, obviously, and I was, if anybody's old enough to remember, used to get a little sticker, the lifeboat thing with a pin, and I used to pin it on people's jackets. I was about 9. That was definitely a long time ago. Right, I'm off. Cheers and beers, guys. Take care.
Thanks for his Howard. Okay, final question for Dave. Sorry.
I was just going to say my phrase was always health and safety is legalised common sense, but that was back in the in the 2022 2002 era, you know, a few years ago. But I agree that common sense is almost gone out the window now.
Yeah.
Sure. And we've all done risk assessments, I hope, by the way, everyone here tonight, because we had to do EMF assessments, didn't we? Risk assessments.
Yeah,
so we've all got those documented.
Yeah, I didn't touch on EMF, but obviously that's a whole new topic, maybe a spoiler for the next talk.
Could add, Keith, how many people here have got an emergency stop button in the shack to remove power in an emergency? There you go.
I have,
You have, yeah. Don't see my hands up.
and in my workshop.
Yeah.
It's the same. We face a lot of the hazards that other people doing DIY and gardening, classic cars, any kind of anything that's that kind of hobby. It's personal risk, isn't it? That what you do about it, you think about it. Like I say, it's not so common, but yeah, we should think about it a bit more perhaps than we do personally, as well as your outdoor events. In your domestic setting, fire blanket, fire extinguisher is appropriate in some places. Not all, but some places. And,
That's a very good point. How many people have got a fire blanket in their kitchen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
How many people have told everybody else how to use them and where that stop switch is?
Well, I used to have a system when I worked for the county. I trained all of the learning disability and children and adult services staff. I think there were about 1,500 staff altogether. I had a system I think it came from it came from America, and it was a panel which imitated flames, and you had the two types of fire extinguisher, which actually emitted a laser beam, and if you didn't get the positioning correct on the flames wouldn't go out. If you got it right, the flames would disappear and die down. But of course you had a limited time on the extinguisher as well. And most people, in fact all people got through the course, and it was a wonderful system. The drawback was they were £10,000, and the county board allowed me to buy 2 sets so we could do multiple training. But they were very good. Yeah, the use of fire extinguishers, very important. And if you've got an out-of-date one, for example, and you want to get rid of it, before you take it up to the recycling centre, go out and practice and use it. Let it off. You'll be surprised at the noise some of them makes.
Good advice, Keith. Thank you. Right. Anyone else got any final comments or questions to Dave before we thank him very much?
Yeah, just
Yes, Phil.
yeah, hi. Yeah, very interesting, Dave. Learned a lot tonight. Where I live, about just over an acre of garden, lots of trees, lots of shrubs, and this growth has been tremendous over the last few years. So if I'm working in the garden because I've got a few radio towers and aerials everywhere, always make sure I've got the mobile phone with me. I never go up the garden without it. Now, I know if I slipped and knocked myself out, I like to think they could still track me with this, because I could be lying out there, nobody would know for quite a few hours, especially in the winter months as well. So it's just a point. I always, if I set off, so easy if I'm doing some adjustments, trying to check a connection. I'll just hook up the garden, I'll be all right. But I always no stop, take this with you. At least it's you can operate it. If you twist your ankle or whatever, you're lying there, you still can bring somebody up for some help. So it's just something I'm very, very disciplined about.
Yeah, no, that's a very good suggestion. I mean, yes, so if you do fall over and you're immobile, assuming you're conscious, you can dial 999 and get some help. And interestingly, some walkie-talkies, some DMR walkie-talkies have got built-in lone worker functions. So basically, if the radio is on its back, if you like, for more than say 2 or 3 minutes, then it'll alert somebody. Of course, obviously, if you're not connected to anybody, then it won't work. But it's interesting that they're building those into radios now. Lone worker functions.
Yeah, what we can do, of course, now, Phil, with the mobile phone is share our location with someone we want to have our location. We don't need to share it with the world, but if you and I were close to each other and I'd say to you, Phil, I'm going to go out onto blah 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 tomorrow, can I share my location? I'm intending to leave at such and such time and get back then. You would be able to immediately alert someone if suddenly I was stuck in one point and it had gone dark and I should have been down hours ago, you'd be able to say this isn't right, you know, after calling me. So I think that's one of the beautiful things, isn't it, of you know, some of the modern equipment. Although having said that, Phil, Roger, you'll remember when we went up, well, the last few times every time we've been up Black Hill, a SOTA summit just outside Holmfirth. When you get to the top of there is absolutely zero phone signal. So only those of them, I mean, some of the modern phones now have got this link. I'm on an Apple phone, so you can now make an emergency call via satellite through the satellite network to raise an emergency, even though you haven't got a phone signal for your phone.
Yeah,
But that's only just come in.
Yeah,
what's generally not known though is that if you're on, say, I don't know, EE network, and EE network's not available, but Vodafone is, you can still make a 999 call. It'll route through the Vodafone network.
Top of Black Hill, nothing is available, no networks available. And I also know that my friend is the team leader on the mountain rescue team there, and what they've got a radio ham in their group of mountain rescue guys, and he set up a repeater to enable them to have mobile phone coverage in this particular location, because it extends quite a long way, and there are a lot of accidents there, usually with people up on you know, bikes, you know, going biking. That's the most common accidents from those hills there. But you know, getting the coverage for the mobile phone has been essential for them.
Yeah, luckily on Black Hill, there's all those nutters who go running up and down it all days. Loads of traffic up there. You're off the path, which I do usually, but I go hunting wildlife. But if you go up there on the state of the path, there's loads of people go past.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. Mike.
The other thing I learnt when I went down to my daughter's, Nick, was that if you've got an Apple tablet or an Apple phone and you're on a family group, your family can monitor where you are, because she monitored all the way down the M6 and the M5, which was quite interesting. Quite frightening as well, but that's one thing you can do, for sure.
Yes, when you made that diversion to Radio World, you know, she was wondering what you were doing in that location for so long.
Yeah. She said to me, "Well, what are you doing up at that place up in Staines in Middlesex?"
Mike.
I wanted to add something regarding old relatives, for example. My stepmom, who's now 90, has had an accident 2 years ago. She had an emergency transmitter from one of the Red Cross institutions, which could be worn on a chain around the neck. There was only a button to press, and then somebody would come and ask what the problem was and so on. But she went into the bathroom to take a wash and laid this chain on the washing machine. And then she fell over into the bathtub and hurt herself and couldn't come out of it by herself. And she couldn't get to the emergency thingy there because it was too far away. So in the course of the day, we tried several times to reach her by telephone, and finally drove over to her and found her after her being 11 hours inside the cold tub. And we had to call the ambulance, of course, and everything was okay afterwards. But she had hurt herself very severely, and it could have been prevented to lie there for such a long time if she had worn this chain around her neck, although she was taking a wash. And so I don't get tired to admonish all my older acquaintances to be very careful regarding the possibility to be reached by something like the Red Cross or an ambulance or something like that. It's very important that you always have something to call help with it.
Yeah, that's very good, Mike. I mean, Dave, go on.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got to leave shortly because I've got to go and pick the ex-whale up from her. I'll be in big trouble if I'm late. So, yeah, thanks everybody for listening to my presentation and also for the great questions and discussion. I've learned things tonight as well. So, thank you all very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Dave, thank you very much for coming along. Very good. Can we show our normal appreciation? Thank you, Dave. And yeah, get back to your granddad duties. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah, 73s.
Bye. 73s.
Yeah, fascinating talk, wasn't it? Really enjoyable. Let me just say, so I'm just going to say good night to those watching live on YouTube. Thank you for sticking with us, and hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed the presentation. It will stay up on the YouTube channel, so the video will be there for people to watch. So thank you very much for coming in. And thank you to those, because I'm just going to stop the recording button, who've enjoyed this meeting tonight. And I'm sure if Dave's writing a final article for RadCom, we'll get Dave back to do a follow-up piece on this, because I think it was a very, very interesting evening. So thank you.